Okay, so today I will be talking about the Algonquins of Barrier Lake in regards to the logging conflict. So the Algonquins of Barrier Lake have been here since time began. Since early contact with settlers, they have had to advocate fiercely for their lands. Barrier Lake is filled with many resources that are desirable to the Canadian and Quebec government, and this is especially true when it comes to lumber. After much conflict between the two governments and the people of Barrier Lake, a trilateral agreement was signed in 1991 and moved toward a bilateral agreement in the 2000s. The government is at this time also threatened their community's governance system by imposing Section 74 of the Indian Act. This was done to undermine the efforts in protecting what rightfully belonged to the people of the Barrier Lake. So we'll add up to this event. For decades, Europeans have wanted to extract resources from rich lands safeguarded by Indigenous people. The Algonquins of Barrier Lake face this issue on a daily basis. Their land is rich in mining minerals, prime lumber, fish, and wildlife. And their surrounding area of their lands has been turned into a national park, um, altering the natural ecosystems as increased recreational outdoorsmen encroach on the surrounding habitat. As the government continued to undermine the Algonquins' claim of land, respect for the people and their authority, a 25-year logging agreement between companies and the provincial government of Quebec was being discussed. This would interfere with every aspect of the traditions practiced by the Barrier Lake people. It was an act towards the use of Section 93 of the Indian Act, which discusses the removal of materials from reserves and claims over what is not theirs. Blockades of major highways and protests against the extraction of resources were all measures that were taken by the Algonquins in order to voice their concerns to those who did not want to listen. To work together more peacefully and collaboratively, the Barrier Lake leaders posed an alternative solution in regards to the issues their people faced. This was the Trilateral Agreement. A man named Regine Paul was brought in to mediate the two opposing parties, regarding the matter. In 1991, the Trilateral Agreement was signed. To put the agreement into motion, those involved had to follow a three-step plan of map drawing and locating sacred lands that were not to be touched. This was not adhered to by the government on many occasions. And they were also supposed to follow a 7-recommendation protocol plan prior to the recommendations being set in stone within the agreement. Economic profit was also on the table for the people of Barrier Lake as the government was removing their resources. So what were the stakes? The Algonquins are the sole caretakers of this land. Their traditional sustainable practices are still in motion today. If these lands were hindered by the government's greed, then their way of life would be in complete jeopardy. Their right would be again undermined, and they would be at risk for facing cultural genocide. So the specific group here is the Michipinnacocinic. Sorry if I said that wrong. And the reserve lands are located near the national park, La Vérendrye in Gatineau, Quebec. And these lands are unceded, which means that these people have never signed treaties allowing the government to use or take control over lands. So we know that the Algonquins of Barrier Lake were involved, as well as their chief, Jean-Maurice Machuan, the government of Quebec, the Canadian government, and also logging companies, as well as the mediator, Regine Paul. The entire community, from the perspective of the Indigenous, was involved as they understood the power of being united. These were not the government's lands, and many were ready to go to jail regarding the matter if it meant that the next generation could continue to live on the lands and practice their traditions without the opposing threat of having their identity stripped from them. In Section 35 of the Indian Act, it states that whereby an act of parliament or provincial legislature, Her Majesty, in right of a province, a municipal or local authority or a corporation is empowered to take or to use lands or any interest therein without the consent of the owner, the power may, with the consent of the governor and council and subject to any terms that may be prescribed by the governor and council, be exercised in relation to lands in a reserve or any interest therein. So the Canadian government saw the people of Barrier Lake as an irritant and did not recognize their rights. And they understood this section and used it in an attempt to eliminate the problem being the people of Barrier Lake. So that's the quote from section 35 there.
We're here out in the access road of our community, which is Barrier Lakes. It's 3 hours north of Ottawa. And right now our community is out here trying to maintain a peaceful blockade so that, and we're calling on the Quebec and federal governments to come back to the table and finish those agreements that they have signed with our community, which is the 1991 trilateral agreements and the bilateral agreements with the Quebec government. And our community is here right now to defend its land. And we'll be here today as long as we can stay, how much we can put up with this, because there's SQs right now. And our riot team has been called up for backup, and we'll be here for a couple of hours. And right now there's 2 blockades, one at near Le Domaine, which is about half hour from here. And we've closed the access road that goes into the community. So right now the people can't pass by on the highway.
Lead the one in charge.
The community is in charge just like last month.
You're gonna be the one?
We're all in charge. Everybody today is in charge. Everybody, it was a community decision like last month.
Okay.
Well, we want our agreements to be honored, and we want Canada to come back to a table and negotiate with the
Don't yell at me. Order you right now to leave the road. That's an order. I leave you.
Just leave the road.
Okay, go.
Okay, just on the side on the road. Shoulder. Right now.
Well, we want the governments to appoint a negotiator and an observer when it comes to our leadership reselection, because once again, within 12 years, Indian Affairs had legally interfered in our internal affairs by recognizing a minority group as our council and ousting our customary chief and council. So we would like them to appoint an observer for that and to send in a negotiator so we can resolve this matter and go home.
They're playing around with our leadership issue long enough. Casey Rudd is not our chief, that's the government's chief, that's their chief. As long as we're always going to be harassed like this, we're never going to rest us too. We're not going to give up. We're never giving up.
If they need to charge some people, by all means, go ahead. But I don't think that would stop us. Any charges that are laid against us, I don't think we're gonna stop until we get what we want. We're going all the way.
Don't push her, she's gonna come this way.
And Rose Nodaway, she was slammed to the ground. She hit her face on the concrete. And Benjamin Nodaway was being accused to chase them around. So they kept him in target. So they were after our acting chief. They're after spokespeople, which one of them is me, and one of them was Marilyn, and she's already arrested. So.
On veut une solution politique, pas militaire.
Outcome, the government failed to adhere to the agreement, as they did not want to follow the most crucial point of their agreements with the people of Barrier Lake. This being the Algonquins playing an equal part in discussing matters about their lands and people. The government also did not like the idea of giving the Barrier Lake people economic profit from the extracted resources. To use their power, the government imposes Section 74 of the Indian Act to abolish Indigenous government. Logging permits were also issued, and many issues remain unresolved today. The hope for the future is that the implementation agreement with Quebec be ratified, that the ancestral customary election process be restored, that the third-party management regime be abandoned, so putting in someone to act as chief due to Section 74. That sustainability, improved living conditions be created through the enlargement of the reserve, electrification, and an updated acceptable housing program. So that's that right there. So in class, the resource outlined on the slide here, McIntosh describes white privilege as an invisible package of unreared assets that I can count on cashing in each day, but about which I am meant to remain oblivious. This work covers all of the outlined issues that came up during the Barrier Lake incident, as the Algonquins were supposed to kind of just turn a blind eye as the government came in to take control. So I have learned that in order to change the way that we do things in Canada in regards to issues associated with Indigenous rights, it's essential that we incorporate their methods into government practices. It is time for them to lead and to stop treating them like children who cannot govern themselves. These concepts and ways of knowing must be implemented in all forms of intelligence, such as science, politics, education, etc., as to allow the next generation a better way of life, an equal way of life. These are my references, other resources. That is it. Thank you so much.